the main fronts in the propaganda war for the last 9 years has been the pretense that the occupation of Afghanistan is somehow about aiding the Afghan people building a better life in Afghanistan. So it's a pleasure to welcome our next speaker, who is a real expert on global justice and aid. Will you please welcome the senior campaigner for War on Want, Yasmin.
To stop the war, not just for organising tonight's event, but I think for really pushing forward the anti-war movement over the last 9 years in this country. So I'll just start off by talking a little bit about my organisation and why we're here. I'm sure many of you would have heard of War on Want, but for those of you that haven't, we're an anti-poverty organisation. We came about as our 60th birthday next year, and we really grew out of the escalation of the arms trade around the Cold War. And the way War on Want works is that we work in solidarity with people all over the world affected by neoliberalism and globalisation. So we support social movements, from sweatshop workers in Honduras to landless farmers in Brazil to people living under occupation in Western Sahara and Palestine. And War on Want bases all its work as an anti-poverty organisation on the premise that poverty is political. Because the majority of poverty in the world doesn't, come about because of tsunamis or earthquakes. The majority of poverty in the world today comes about because of the decisions, the policies and practices of governments and corporations. And I think no clearer an example of that is the situation in Afghanistan now, where we have, the richest countries in the world, the UK and the US, going to war in one of the world's poorest countries. Just to give you kind of a bit of statistical kind of evidence, these are kind of World Bank and UN figures. According to the UN's Human Development Index, Afghanistan is ranked 180 out of 102 countries in the world, so kind of the second poorest. And on the UN's Poverty Index, it's ranked as the poorest country in the world. Now, 1 in 5 children in Afghanistan dies before the age of 5. 87% of the Afghani population don't have access to safe drinking water. 1 in 8 Afghani women dies of a pregnancy-related kind of incident, and as many of you will know, maternal health is one of the central indicators of kind of poverty. Chronic hunger affects 7 million Afghanis. And, the government goes on a lot, the UK government, through its Department for International Development, goes on a lot about progress that's been made, kind of education and kind of schooling. But I mean, even the World Bank says that we have a situation in Afghanistan that, the little development that there has been has still left the fact that 40% of schools don't have buildings, so we're just kind of operating kind of in, outside. So, these figures just absolutely throw into kind of the ether the idea that this war is in any way benefiting the Afghani people, that it's bringing it development. Because, as we all know as peace activists, war doesn't bring development. You can't get development or security through dropping bombs. You can't get development and security by hiring private armies to fly, unmanned drones into Afghanistan. And I think a key role for us here in the anti-war movement now is at the time of, in the middle of this economic crisis where we're seeing massive public spending cuts in the UK, the health and education budget being absolutely decimated, and yet the money being spent on the war machine escalating, we really have to use this as an argument for why this war is wrong and this war is unjust and it needs to end now. So the UK government, just to kind of give you a bit more information, has spent, according to research we've done, over £8 billion on the war in Afghanistan since 2001. £8 billion. That's a lot of money, given for development supposedly hasn't happened. So what is this money going on? Well, Tony Ben touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of new technology. One of the things we've seen in the war in Afghanistan is a massive increase in kind of corporations pushing new technology on governments. Big corporations have always made money out of war, but in the current kind of global war machine, they're making even more money. And the drones, these unmanned drones, are just one example. But also we have this massive growth of private armies, private military and security companies, which the UK government first began using in its war in Afghanistan, because private armies using private contractors to fight unpopular wars is a much easier way for governments to kind of do that, because you don't get the body bags coming back like you do when a soldier dies. We have no figures, for example, no accurate figures for the number of private mercenaries that died working for the British government in Iraq. And we see, the research that we found is that the UK government is spending millions and millions of pounds on private armies in Afghanistan. Of the 39 private armies that exist in Afghanistan, 10 are from the UK, which means that our companies, the UK is the key industrial kind of heart of that industry. And in the occupation of Iraq, we saw the massive human rights abuses that these private armies were causing. I mean, Blackwater is kind of a notorious kind of company now in terms of the massive killings it did, such as Nisour Square when it killed 17 Afghani civilians. But we're seeing those same human rights abuses happening in Afghanistan. For example, I'll just give you two examples. BAE Systems, a well-known kind of British company, a contractor working for them shot dead a handcuffed Iraqi detainee kind of 2 years ago. We also have more subsidiaries from Blackwater kind of killing Afghani civilians out of shooting cars. Again, very similar to the activities that are going on. And I think the use of private armies is another reason why this war needs to be opposed, because the controls, the democratic controls we have over private contractors are so far away from the controls we have over national armies. And so we're running a campaign to get private armies regulated in the UK. It's ridiculous in this country, you need a license to watch TV, but not a license to run a private army, and that's something we're kind of really campaigning against. But it's not just the army that's being privatised in